Welcome back to AP U.S. History. This is Chapter 9, dealing with the Federalists, and parts of 8. This is Part 4. We had been talking about Washington, presidency, some of the foreign policy and domestic policies that were instituted under his presidency. We looked at Hamilton's financial plan to put America on a sound financial basis. We also looked at the beginning of the two-party system in America, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. We also looked at some treaties that were signed. We talked about Jay's Treaty, which really wasn't worth the paper it was written on, but it kept America out of war. Jefferson was opposed to the treaty, along with his followers. Hamilton accepted the treaty because it improved relationships somewhat with Great Britain, who he sees as an important trading partner with the United States and a good source of revenue. Now, the Pinckney Treaty is going to be signed in 1795. This is going to be a good treaty for the United States. Spain is going to make some concessions to the Americans because they want to improve their relationship with America. They were afraid that the British and the Americans might hook up and somehow oppose them. And so they're going to make some concessions. One, Americans will be able to use the Mississippi River, and they'll be able to deposit their goods in New Orleans. Pinckney got this agreement, and it's going to be ratified by the government. And this is going to open up this western area to all those farmers who, to this point, were trying to get their goods across the mountains. They just now need to float their goods down to the Mississippi, to New Orleans, store it there, and then ship it there to the rest of the world. It also settled the dispute between the Spanish and the Americans over the boundary between the United States and Spain. So this is going to be a good thing for the Americans. Now there are Indian problems, Native American problems on the frontier. After the Revolutionary War, the Iroquois sided with the wrong group, the British, and they're going to be driven out of the United States or placed on reservations. And many of them did flee to Canada. And they're not going to be a major threat to Americans living on the frontier. The Shawnee and the Miami tribes that were in the Ohio area in the Northwest Territory are still going to be a problem for the Americans because they're being supplied with weapons and materials to fight the Americans. The British even pay a bounty on American scalps. Little Turtle is going to be the leader of the Miami tribes fighting the Americans, but he will be defeated by the Americans at Fallen Timber. General Mad Dog Anthony Wayne will lead the Americans at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1784 and bring the Native Americans to their knees. And this will force the British out of the forts in that area. The Treaty of Grenville will be signed in 1795, forcing two-thirds of the Indians to leave Ohio and Indiana. The British finally will abandon the forts and applauded by many Americans on the frontier. Washington is going to set a precedent of just running for 2 terms, 8 years, and other presidents are going to follow that up to FDR. In Washington's farewell address, he warned about political parties. He thought that that would be a thing that would tear America apart, and he also warned against foreign alliance. Here's a picture of good old Anthony Wayne, hero at Fallen Timber. And here was a treaty signed by Native Americans in that area. Um, Getting back to Washington's speech, Jeffersonians a little bit angered because they want to be allies to the French. This isolationist policy of not signing alliances with other nations is going to be the way we're going to go about our business for the next 100 years. In terms of relationships with France, uh, the French condemned the Jay's Treaty because they thought that Americans and the British were moving closer together. They felt that it violated the spirit of the Franco-American alliance that had been signed in 1778. Um, French refused to receive America's newly appointed envoys because of the treaty. Um, we will, under Adams, send some delegations to France to arrange for normalization of foreign affairs, uh, trading concessions, so forth. President will send John Marshall and a group of delegates there. They will meet secretly, be approached secretly by some French agents named XYZ. That's really not their name, but that's the alias that they were given. They want a bribe from the American government before the delegation can meet the foreign minister Talleyrand. The Americans refused to pay the bribe. Marshall is seen as a hero. Adams is seen as holding to his guns. John Adams. It does worsen relationship between the French and the Americans, and there's a call to war. Uh, as far as what Talleyrand was hoping to get was about $250,000 for himself, and he wanted to get about $12 million in loans from the Americans, which he never got. These are a picture of the agents who were trying to get the bribe. Not really. But maybe you'll remember that. For the next 2.5 years, we will, after the XYZ affair, we will be in what is considered a quasi-war, an almost war. The French take our vessels, and we take some of theirs. They get the best of us. They take about 300 American vessels. We take about 80 French ships through U.S. privateers and the U.S. Navy. Adams, like Washington, was afraid of a full-blown war with foreign powers, and so he's going to try to prevent that. The Convention of 1800, France and America meet, and they work out some of their agreements peacefully, and this undeclared war comes to an end. This shows the frigate USS Constellation fighting the French, and this goes on for about 2.5 years. The French agreed to end the Franco-American alliance. They never really held us to it to begin with. The U.S. says that we'll pay for any kind of losses that American shippers have endured. The French won't have to worry about that. This will pave the way for better relationships with France, and in 1803 they will sell us the Louisiana Purchase. Adams felt this convention, this agreement, was his finest achievement during his presidency. He was only elected for 4 years. As far as U.S. legislation related to the foreign policy, during this time, the Alien Sedition Act was passed in 1798 during Adams' presidency. The Federalists didn't like people criticizing them. It seemed like the newly arrived immigrants were the folks that sort of sided with the Democratic Republicans who were in favor of the French. Again, Adams' government, the Federalists, seemed to side more with the British. So if you were an alien and you were speaking falsely and you were considered a threat to the American government, you could be deported. And also it raised the limit from 5 to 14 years in order to become a citizen. This was the alien part of the act. But the Federalists didn't like being criticized, and so they're going to use their power to end some of that. So what's a good way to do it? Well, let's take a look at those immigrants coming in who seem to always be against us. Let's make it a requirement that they have to stay here longer to vote. And if the president deems you dangerous, you can be kicked out. Now, this part of this act really never was enforced. The other side of the act, the Sedition Act, said that if you criticize American policy and the president, you could be fined or imprisoned. Of course, this was a direct violation of the First Amendment. Never challenged in the courts, so the Supreme Court never ruled whether this was constitutional or not. As a result of this act, about 10 Jeffersonian newspaper editors were convicted and placed in jail because they criticized Adams and the Federalist government. When Jefferson becomes president, these folks will be pardoned. This law expired the last day that Adams left office, or these laws. In response to the Alien Sedition Act, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions were passed, one written by Jefferson, the other one written by Madison. They believed that the Alien Sedition Act was unconstitutional and ought to be nullified. They came up with the idea of the compact theory that said that the states really gave the national government power, and if they deemed something unconstitutional, they certainly could nullify it. They would be the final judge. Did other states go along with that? No, only in Virginia and Kentucky were these resolutions passed. And the interesting part about this is that Southerners will use this as a stepping stone or a springboard for justifying them leaving the Union in 1860. Now, the Revolution of 1800 is significant because there's going to be a shift in power in American politics. The Federalists are going to lose control of the presidency and never gain it again. So Adams and Washington are considered Federalist presidents, but from that point on, the Federalist Party will never hold the White House again. The power will be transferred to the Democratic Republicans, which will later just be called the Democrats. Jefferson becomes president. He wins a victory over Adams. Most of his support comes in the Northeast, New England area, and you can see that Jefferson's comes from the West and the South. And we'll stop right there.